So my name is Brad Wetzler, and I'm a writer, author, journalist, writing coach, yoga teacher, editor, various hats. I've been writing and telling stories and editing for, more years than I want to say, almost 30, I guess. It's good to see you here today. The past several sessions, we've focused on kind of bigger picture stuff. And I thought today we would kind of go deeper into kind of line by line writing, because it's just as crucial and important. And there's actually some very easy rules, tips, kind of things to keep in mind that can really clean up your writing, make it stronger and more powerful pretty darn easily if you do these things. So I thought we'd just kind of focus on the sentence by sentence stuff today. So I'll just dive in. Good writing. I mean, anyone who reads books, articles, has a feel for what they think good writing is, and we kind of know it when we see it. But there's one baseline or several baseline qualities that good writing has, and it's essentially, active, clear, and brief. These are the three things that we want to kind of make sure that our line writing is infused with. We want action. We want strong verbs. We'll get to the specifics of it, but we also want kind of lean, brief, and clear. And that defines really good writing. And there's a lot of people, especially beginning writers, can tend to think that style is what makes good writing, that it's somehow unique to them, that, certain turns of phrases, certain ways of describing things, certain types of color. But in fact, the strongest writers actually have a lack of that sort of fireworks and kind of uniqueness to their writing. Obviously there are some writers who excel at that and are very extraordinary in that field, but basically I'd say 90% of writers, both literary writers, journalists, really focus on clarity, brevity, and activeness and action. And so number one is strong verbs. And it's actually by far the most important way to, and the easiest way to make your writing stronger. Use strong verbs. What's that mean? Well, verbs that say a lot, verbs that actually contain elements of color in them and actually force or move your story forward with some punch. Someone walks across the floor, that's okay, but someone trudges, someone skulks, somebody triipses or trips. English has so many wonderful verbs, and they say so much, and they move the narrative forward. And also avoid kind of Latinate words. And Latinate verbs are verbs that kind of have that IATE, like on my note here, initiate, those kinds of, I initiated contact with somebody. No, I touched somebody, so watch your use of those Latinate verbs and just limit them. They're not very strong. Anglo-Saxon verbs, things with consonants, hard consonants in them, tend to be stronger, tend to kind of land harder in our consciousness, in our bodies. That's the other kind of element of strong verbs is we feel them in our bodies, really. Initiate, I don't feel that anywhere, but trudge, I do. It's kind of it's an embodied word. And so we want our writing to feel embodied, and strong verbs helps us do that. So that's verbs. So, verbs are, like I said, it's like, I'd say 3/4 of good writing is just really leaning on strong verbs. So that's point number one. Point number two, adverbs. Get rid of them. They hardly ever need to be used. Like I talked about that word, trudged, or, does somebody walk slowly or walk hesitantly? There's probably verbs out there that say those things. And so the adverbs are unnecessary. So find that strong verb and look to eliminate almost all, adverbs. I mean, it's one thing I do when I edit my own pieces is go through and just look for adverbs. We kind of like load them up. We think it makes it more ornate. It makes it more colorful. It doesn't. So adverbs, lose them. Adjectives. lose them too. I'm not sure why we weren't taught this in school. I never kind of got these kinds of lessons in school. We were told what they were, what adverbs and adjectives were, but adjectives, obviously sometimes you need them, but as a rule, nouns contain adjectives. So in other words, like, you look at a spider web, people are always calling spider webs gauzy or lacy. A spider web contains in that. If you've seen a spider web, you know that the spider web is gauzy or lacy. That a dandelion is yellow. So you don't want to load up your sentences with adjectives that are already contained in your nouns. So that's a way to, again, in editing your work, simply going through and eliminating adjectives, unnecessary ones, is a great way to make your writing leaner and clear is more powerful. Obviously, there are some times you will use adjectives. Clouds, for example, have many types of shades. A dark cloud, you would want to use an adjective there. An old book, those kinds of things. I'm not saying that adjectives are utterly worthless, but just make sure you're seeing if there's a redundancy happening with adjectives, because that adds words, and that extra words is less strong writing. So we've already cut out a lot of words with using strong verbs, getting rid of our adverbs, and really limiting our adjectives. The next point I want to make is little qualifiers. We want to get rid of those too, because again, we're seeking lean writing. Little qualifiers like sort of, a bit, a little. They don't add anything. They're just extra words. And they do something that's kind of destructive to your writing. They whittle away at your authority, because you're sort of like hedging your bets always, and the writer is going to want to, the reader is interested in knowing what you really think and believe, and what you've seen and heard and done. And anytime you use a little qualifier, you just whittle away your credibility. I mean, there's a famous writing teacher who used to say, be bold, don't be kind of bold. So that's a great example of that. What's kind of bold? So get rid of those little qualifiers. Let's talk about punctuation for a minute. The period. Well, period, we use lots of periods, and I would invite you to use more of them. And what I mean by that is, break up your sentences when they're long and complicated. Again, it's another thing I remember learning in high school writing is, we wrote with long, complicated sentences, it seems like, lots of howevers, and just know that, there's nothing wrong with a short subject-verb sentence that then has a period and you start another one. I mean, obviously, you'd want to vary it a little bit. You want to create some texture with the lengths of your sentences. But as a general rule, if you've got a long, complicated sentence, ask yourself, can it be broken up into two sentences or maybe three? And sometimes, again, think about texture though too. As I say that, none of these rules are hard and fast and permanent. You want to be flexible with them. So look through your paragraphs. Do you have a nice variety of sentence lengths, including very short sentences? He walked, period. I mean, that's a great sentence. There's nothing wrong with that. So again, think about eliminating long, cumbersome sentences and just adding some periods. Exclamation points, get rid of them. We really don't need them at all. I mean, maybe once, in a quote, maybe, or not even in a quote. Trying to think of one example of an exclamation point. Exclamation points tend to be very subjective and add this emphasis that's usually not needed. It's better to use your verbs and creating strong sentences that get your point across without having to add this extra kind of layer of enthusiasm that really doesn't do much. And again, that's not a rule you would always use, but it's a pretty good rule. So just ask yourself, is the exclamation point really needed? Next thing, mood changes. Hey, Tommy, we're all right. Settle down. I know he's excited about mood changes. You're good. Come on, bud, come here. Mood changes are words like, but, yet, however. let me pause for just a minute. Hey, bud. You're good. Nothing's wrong. Come over. Come on. Tommy. Mood changes again. So, but, yet, however, those kinds of things are important words, and you do use them. And you want to use them at the beginning of sentences. And often you'll see with beginning writers, they'll use those words at the end of sentences, sort of like, putting that however at the end. And what that does is it makes the reader guess about the mood change you're doing. So instead, you want to use the buts, yets, however, these shifts, these big shifts in what you're going to say, big shifts in mood, big shifts in thinking. You want to lead with those because the reader, it signals to the reader that something just different is happening. So don't bury these mood changing words. Contractions, use them. Better writing in our day and time is sort of casual writing. And if you're writing some formal report for a big government organization, I don't know, maybe you would want to use not use contractions as much, but anything that's a personal essay, a memoir, even something in business, you want to use contractions. It adds a sort of colloquial, casual way that is not too casual though. It's not too casual. Can't is better than cannot, and it shows that you're kind of in charge of your writing. You're not being extra stilted, and you're being casual and communicative, and really writing almost like you're speaking. At least if you're speaking in a in kind of a business meeting or even among friends, you want to use contractions. So it's an important thing. Vague conceptual nouns. So one of the things that's happened in, I'd say, the last 30 years, or maybe a bit more, maybe since the 50s, is we like, using these big nouns that don't involve people, that don't involve, things that you can picture. Words like cynicism, hostilities. We've moved toward. You hear this a lot in the news, especially, and it's kind of a bad habit of storytellers and writers everywhere. Hostilities began between. What's a hostility? It's a vague word, a noun that you can't even picture. Anyone involved. You can't picture what happened. Again, writing is so much about giving the reader an experience. And so vague conceptual nouns, I'm not saying you shouldn't use them ever. I mean, obviously there's a right time to use them, and I'll get to one of those times in a minute, but just limit them. See if you can't make the writing more personal, more visual, more impactful, using nouns and verbs that actually say more, that allow the reader to picture what's going on. Kind of related to that is something I call Nounisms. And it's sort of it's another way in which these kind of vague and complicated nouns are creeping into our language. Again, you hear this a lot on the TV news or the radio, things like, oh, we have a thunderstorm probability situation arising this afternoon. I mean, it doesn't say much at all. I mean, what's wrong with just saying, violent thunderstorms are on their way, that kind of sentence. So again, if you look at them and just know that the kind of the general rule about that is things you can picture, things that add impact, things that, that create a sense of realness, of being really connected to the physical world is a stronger way to write. So be careful about kind of piling on lots of nouns and creating these complicated noun complexes. It's not a very good way to write. My next point, overstatement. I was blessed with, when I began my work as a writer and editor, I was fortunate to have my first job being at a major national magazine. And I had a boss that was really obsessed with understatement in a good way. And I really learned that it's rarely necessary to emphasize exaggerate things. There's sort of it's one of the reasons the New Yorker is considered such a great magazine, is because everything is understated, and maybe sometimes a bit too much in the New Yorker, but just know you don't want to say things that I felt as if 10 747s were screaming through my brain. I mean, that's just it's not, it's an overstatement. It's no matter what mood you're in, it's probably unlikely that it really feels like that. So just know that your default is kind of, being calm. You're building credibility as a writer. You're trying to credibility is a big word, important word in writing, and you're trying to establish trust between the reader and you. And anytime you overstate something, including using exclamation points, you erode that trust, you erode that credibility. So again, be careful with overstatement. This is kind of an unusual one here, but honor the unconscious, and this is an important point, and it does fit in this session today. But just knowing that that trying too hard to write powerful sentences can actually detract from your writing. So honor the way things come out first, and then also go back and rewrite. So I guess but what I mean by honor the unconscious is knowing that first words, best words is, I think Isaac Asimov said that. It's often very true. So just honor those words. And if they come out wordy, come in and take out the adverbs and adjectives. But usually there's some strength in your first thought. Next point, the quickest fix. So as you are going through your writing and doing self-editing, often, if something's complicated and kind of causing you keep reworking a sentence that just doesn't seem to quite work. My first impulse is, what can I cut from that sentence? My second impulse is, can I cut the whole sentence? And so just look at your writing like you really are trying to make it brief and clear. And anything that you're like trying to massage to death and you're kind of having trouble solving it, just get the red pen out and cut. It's just, there's an old, reason. There's an old what's the term for it? It's called Occam's razor. Anyone heard of Occam's razor? It was it's basically the idea that the shortest is usually the best. Whenever we complicate things, whether it's in writing or explaining, or just know that you want to get that razor out and just keep cutting away till you get down to that strong noun verb construction. He walked, he trudged. That's so much better than some long sentence that says in 10 words that same kind of concept. Paragraphs, keep them pretty short. Reading is a visual activity. And so you want to give the reader a sense of some space. We want to give people space in our lives. We want to give our readers space too. And that, so using shorter paragraphs is a good strategy for doing that. No, I'm not saying make every paragraph, 2 or 3 sentences and stack about 10 of them on top of each other. Obviously, you want some texture, you want some change, you want to change it up a bit, but know that visually, a shorter paragraph can give the reader a chance to take a breath, a chance to, not focus so much on this long block of text, and gives them some space to actually feel in their bodies what's happening in the text and in the writing. So just lean a little bit on short paragraphs. Rewriting, it's a big topic. And I think E.E. Cummings, said, all writing is rewriting. And just take that to heart. I do love honoring the first word, best word idea, but it does take you do need to review it. You need to go through and sort of restructure things. I'm always amazed at, I'll spend, an hour on a couple of pages I'm working on and come back the next day. And again, the unconscious has been working throughout the night. It's interesting how it works. And suddenly I'll see that this complicated passage that I struggled with the day before can be simplified, pretty easily by cutting some sentences out. And then another thing to think in rewriting is, especially if you're doing storytelling, is to really lean on chronology. Sometimes we, if something is feeling complicated in our writing and you're telling a story, I often notice that I've actually kind of gotten the chronology a bit out of order, and I've started to tell a story, and then 2 sentences in, I'm using the had construction. So I walked to the store. I opened the door and entered and went down to the candy bar aisle. And suddenly I'm like, I had been really hungry that morning, and I had a stomach ache before that. And so suddenly I'm backing up. I'm backing up in time. And so, so look at your sentences. If you're starting to use the word had, you might be getting things out of order. And you want to then go back and look, when does this story really begin? Does the story begin with me walking in the store, or does it begin when I woke up this morning with a bit of a stomach ache, which then turned to real hunger, which then caused me to go down to the store? So as you rewrite, as you edit, as you self-edit, really look for chronological, flaws. And of course, sometimes we do want to use had. Sometimes it's a good strategy, but if you see lots of hads, you might be getting the the order of the events kind of mixed up and honoring the backstory more than the forestory. Tommy, come here. My next topic is something I call the ladder of abstraction, and this is more about like on a paragraph or a page level than a sentence level. But you want to kind of vary what I call the ladder of abstraction. So, we've talked before in here about how scenes are a crucial, are the currency in kind of personal writing and memoir writing, and also in nonfiction writing. And scenes are rich. They have a lot of you are there qualities. The time in a scene is actually kind of happening. It's unfolding as you're reading the sentence. You're kind of there with the author. But then you want to shift occasionally into what up the ladder of abstraction. And what I mean by that is like you move into a bit more of a summary mode, and you pull out of the scene, you pull out of the sensory information, and you use sort of higher level words. I'll give you an example here to bring this out. If you're writing an article about a kayaker in Colorado on the rivers, the scene material is going to be on the river. You're gonna see the sparkling of the water. You're gonna smell the fresh air. You're gonna be very close to that protagonist and his experience. But that can get tedious, and it actually can staying too long in that place. The reader can get why do I care so much about this kayaker? I'm kind of getting bored with this guy. So when you move up the ladder of abstraction, you might say things like Bill the kayaker, well, he's one of, thousands of river runners in America. And river runners tend to be people like this. They hold this types of jobs. In the summertime, they go on vacations to rivers in Colorado. And it just lifts the writing out of, the you are there-ness, which is a very important part of writing, but it gives the reader a break then, and actually places, the subject you're writing about in a little broader, a broader space. And we actually then learn more about the category that Bill the kayaker belongs to. And we get more meaning, really. I mean, when you stay too close to the ground with your writing, it's hard to get, the meaning of what's happening. If when you explain with these abstract words, like, Bill's a river runner, he's an outdoor enthusiast, and you start to talk about those things, you add layers of meaning. But then, of course, you do want to go back down to the ground again. You don't want to stay too long up there. And finally, you don't really want to, if you notice your writing is sort of some journalistic writing, especially newspaper writing, gets kind of trapped in that kind of summaryville. And so you want to vary it. Being trapped in that summaryville, you really don't get much texture at all. You don't get that down on the earth kind of feeling. You also don't get the passage of time. You don't get to experience the world with your protagonist or with you, the author. So I think I'll wrap up here. The last thing that does when you shift into this ladder of abstraction, it kind of gives a show and tell quality to your writing. You often hear that you should show, but I argue you should show and tell. And so keep show and tell. Get real close to the water with the kayaker. Then come up and tell me why he's important, where he fits in the big scheme of things. And so I'll conclude here today by again kind of repeating this thing I mentioned at the beginning. good writing is clear, it's brief, it's active. Don't mistake, like lots of quirky turns of phrases, extra notes of color, really vivid adjectives that don't need to be there. Don't confuse that with developing your author voice. Some of the strongest author voices, of our time have been, quite spare. And voice actually then when you write in this clear, concise way, your author voice tends to be more about your worldview, and that leaks through. What you choose to focus on becomes more important. How you think about something becomes more important, and the reader doesn't get distracted by the fanciness of what some people might think is good writing. So again, just gravitate towards brief, clear, concise, and active, and your writing will get stronger, and your stories will get better. People will love them more, and you'll be able to tell your stories, and the reader will get what you mean more easily. So again, just keep moving towards simplicity. It's really where the power in writing is. And so that's my little presentation for today. Any questions? It's okay if there's no questions. It's pretty kind of clear stuff today. But anyone had an experience with anything along these lines, feel free to make a comment or question. And all this stuff comes out in the rewriting and in the editing. It's just a crucial phase of it. Don't assume that, as much as the first words, best words is true. It requires the work. It requires, going through and weeding out the unnecessary words. So it's good to see you guys. Jeff, yeah.
One question.
Yeah.
Because I recently ran into this, and when I asked myself, I was like, I have no idea, but what is a paragraph?
Good point, yeah.
It's like a simple thing, but I have no clue.
Well, that's a good question, because it's not always clear. I mean, in some ways, a paragraph can be arbitrary. It's just a breaking up of text. But, a good paragraph, most paragraphs do tend to be organized around, a topic or a single, if you're writing a memoir, as I know you are, when things get broken down, it gets easier for the reader. So the first thing I did, you might choose a paragraph about the first thing you did as opposed to the second thing you did. If you're writing about, less about a story and more discursive writing, a paragraph is organized around one central idea. And usually, the opening line of a paragraph is the topic sentence, and it organizes the whole sentence. So you want to write like a strong topic sentence, that is more general, more abstract, even in memoir, you do this. On the first day, I spent the day walking around the old city of Jerusalem. There's your topic sentence, and everything that follows that then is we see you wandering around old city Jerusalem. And then when you leave Jerusalem, old city, you go to the new city, you start a new paragraph, and you lead with, and then I left the old city for the new city. And so, they tend to be organized around strong topic sentences, and all the information can be kind of contained within that topic sentence. So that's technically what they are. But I admit sometimes you simply do want to break things up for the sake of breaking it up. And there isn't a lot of logic to it. So both things are true. So, yeah, good question, though.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Anything, Susan, Robin? Nope. Debbie?
Oh, thank you. That was really good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming, and thanks for listening to Tommy's barking here. And I think someone must have been at the door, but I appreciate you being here. Thanks, Debbie, and I'll be here again next week. I'll figure out the topic here probably later today. So I hope to see you again, and it's fun to see you. So hope you have a good day.